So I have a question for all the LEOs watching this video. How motivated are you to avoid being sued in federal court? Dumb question, right? This is Adam from Valdez Training Consultants with the third video in our series on breaking the ice. If I told you there were certain requirements that you have when you arrest or detain a person from a foreign country that if you fail to fulfill them, would cause you some bad outcomes in your cases, or you could find yourself the defendant in a federal lawsuit. Remember, in federal civil rights cases, personal punitive damages apply. That means you pay the damages out of pocket and that your agency doesn't cover them. Do I have your attention? I'm going to provide some information intended to help U.S. law enforcement officers avoid this legal pitfall in their cases and avoid becoming defendants in federal civil rights cases. I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of law enforcement officers in the U.S. are motivated to follow the rules and respect people's rights because it's the right thing to do. That said, our best intentions won't help us respect people's rights if we don't even know the rights exist. And not getting sued in federal court is certainly an added incentive, wouldn't you say? So let's dig in. Stay with us to the end of this video and I'll share some additional resources that you can get online for free to share with other officers from your agency. No matter where our instructors travel throughout the U.S., they consistently report the vast majority of LEOs in their classes are underinformed or completely unaware of an issue that could result in these federal lawsuits I've mentioned and or result in negative outcomes in court in one of their own cases. Now I'm talking about consular notification requirements. Now if you go to this website, you'll find a list of contact information for the consulates and embassies here in the U.S. of most foreign countries on the planet. Whenever a foreign national from this list of countries is arrested or detained, the arrestee can request that officials of the closest consulate from their country be notified of the arrest or detention. The arresting agency is required to facilitate communication between consular officials and the person in custody. Also, foreign nationals arrested or detained by U.S. law enforcement must be advised of this without delay. Consular officials are entitled to communicate with and have access to the foreign national in custody in order to provide consular services, including arranging for legal representation. For foreign nationals of the countries on this list of mandatory notification countries, consular officials must be notified of the arrest or detention of a foreign national regardless of the wishes of the person in custody. So Kevin and I are going to discuss these requirements and some particular case law related to them. Okay, Kevin, given the consular notification requirements as we've already laid out, would you like to share some additional insights or add some context?
Well, a good practice obviously is to carry that page with you in your briefcase somewhere, or at least be aware of which countries are mandatory notifications and which ones aren't. So we as officers need to be aware of that because it will have an effect on the ultimate outcome of that sentencing, not the arrest, okay, but the sentencing of it. And there is a court case that we talk about, which is Valdez versus Oklahoma, which is pretty concrete in why this matters. And a very interesting case in that, you know, people are thinking, well, hey, I'll know this guy's from a foreign country because maybe he doesn't speak English that well, and then I'll be aware that I have to think about the consular issue. But Valdez had lived in this area a long, long time, but was not a citizen. So when these officers made this arrest on Valdez, and it was for a homicide, nobody even thought for a second that this man was not from the U.S. because he had been around for years. Once you find out that person is not a U.S. citizen, he's a foreign national, this is when you have to be aware of this. And to my knowledge, Adam, and I'd get your input on this too, this normally would take place as far as the notification, asking him if he wants the consulate notified, more in the jail intake procedures than like you on the side of the road arresting this guy.
Yes, that's true, but the requirements place responsibility squarely on the arresting official. That is to say, if you put the handcuffs on or you're the arresting officer of record, you're ultimately responsible for making sure these requirements are fulfilled. If there's a lawsuit, your agency can't protect you from the award of personal punitive damages. So it behooves officers to either do it for themselves or at least document that it's been done and by whom, yes?
It's you or the fact that you cause that it is done. So, like passing the information along to somebody, say, hey, look, he needs the consular notification, or at least ask about it. And then that's
Certainly.
documented in your report. If you in fact don't do it, at least you have caused
Right.
it to be done by somebody else.
That's why we've added into our intake and booking questions page in our manuals, quisiera hablar con su consulado, to ensure officers can get the answer needed.
Correct. And in this particular case, this Valdez, this actually became more or less an international incident because the president of Mexico was writing letters to the governor of Oklahoma. If you can imagine that as a governor, you're getting letters from the president of another country. And of course, there was interaction between their president and our president. And while Valdez got the death penalty, it was commuted to life based upon the lack of complying with the international treaty.
They argued that since Mexico is opposed to the death penalty, the consulate would have heaped resources on the defense team for a better representation in court. That argument was the difference in the sentencing outcome. So since then, the defense bar across the U.S. has been using Valdez versus Oklahoma to argue all kinds of criminal cases based on that premise. And they've had some success in getting evidence suppressed, getting cases overturned, or sentences modified. Obviously, this applies regardless of what language the arrestee speaks, but ATC is about helping LEOs get better outcomes when dealing with Spanish speakers. So which Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America are mandatory notification countries?
To my knowledge, the country that is still a must notify where the arrestee does not get a choice is Costa Rica.
So the bottom line here is that if you have someone in custody that you identify as being from another country, you need to make sure that you ask this question, or in certain cases that you need to make the notification regardless of their wishes. Again, if the arrestee is from Costa Rica, it doesn't matter what they want since it's a mandatory notification country. This will keep you from ending up in a big problem in the future.